So 1963, John F. Kennedy was assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald. He was in an elevated position with a line of sight to the president who was driving through Daley Plaza in Dallas. Okay. So right now as it stands, as of this initial broadcast, this initial show, maybe when you hear this later, things might change because the news headlines are constantly changing. But right now, there's not a whole lot out there. There's still more questions than the answers as to reason why Secret Service failed. You got people blaming each other. You've got reports saying that it wasn't all Secret Service, that it was mostly non-Secret Service people there because Jill Biden had an event in Pittsburgh that needed covering. Whatever. But keep in mind all these questions out there because people thought, whoever it was behind this, thought that they were going to have wall-to-wall coverage for days of the assassination of Donald Trump. But it failed. So the focus went right to what happened. And that's where we're at. But think about this for a minute, okay? If you're planning the assassination of somebody, okay, when Ronald Reagan was shot, it was a lunatic thinking that Jodie Foster told him to. Wasn't really politically motivated. You go back to some of the other assassination attempts on other people, non-presidents, okay? Other reasons. But when you go back to Kennedy and even Lincoln, these were political ideological assassinations, okay? A lot of what has happened with the Kennedy assassination still classified, covered up, but you can put things together and you can figure out that, yeah, it was more than Lee Harvey Oswald. It was more than a lone gunman that did this. After all, how did Jack Ruby, a nightclub owner, get into the basement of police headquarters in Dallas, pull out a gun and shoot Lee Harvey Oswald point blank in front of a bunch of cops and then die in prison, not because he was guilty, because that got overturned and he was going to have a new trial, but he got sick. Anyways, so we have two people, Crooks, Oswald, Thomas Matthew Crooks, lone gunman. They both were able to get to an elevated line of sight, whether it was the bookstore or the book depository building or this roof that apparently the slope was too steep for Secret Service and therefore was dangerous, according to Kimberly Cheadle, the head of Secret Service. Both targets. So we're comparing the assassination of Kennedy versus Trump because the blueprint is the exact same thing. The blueprint of what went down is the exact same thing. You've got two lone gunmen, elevated position, direct line of sight. Both targets were in an open-air space, a convertible and the field out in Pennsylvania. Both got off at least 3 rounds. Lee Harvey Oswald got 1, and then the second one with the kill shot with the car moving away. Again, that led to conspiracies. But again, open-aired, multiple shots getting off. Both shooters eventually killed, one on the spot, Crooks, and the other the next day in the basement of the Dallas police station by a nightclub owner. So the Secret Service, all of a sudden now, instead of focusing the news headlines on the assassination, it's the assassination attempts. Now, Lee Harvey Oswald, in October of 63, had come back from Mexico. People speculate, conspiracy theorize, that he went to some foreign consulates, Russia, whatever. So he had an influence. People think the CIA did it, or at least was behind it. Here, obviously, we know there's somebody else behind it. So again, it's not a lone gunman. There's something else going on. Another similarity. When you take a look at what happened to Lee Harvey Oswald before the assassination, witnesses said they saw him at the book building. He was at the telephone. He was eating lunch in the cafe. He was all over the place. Eyewitness accounts put Lee Harvey Oswald at the place. You took to Crooks, all kinds of social media, video of him, people pointing to police. Hey, there he is. What's he doing up there? Hey, police, there's somebody up there. So at the scene, clear cut, slam dunk. This is the guy, right? Law enforcement. In fact, some people in the conspiracy of Lee Harvey Oswald said they saw him in the window of the book building. People saw Crooks on the roof, but no shots were fired. Apparently some police officer went to the roof to check on Crooks. Crooks apparently put his gun and pointed it at the officer, who dropped off the roof, and then still nothing, and shots were fired. Some people are theorizing, and I think this is really conspiracy, but because Crooks was on the roof and the police were inside the building of this AGR building, some people are trying to put out there a theory, like the grassy knoll in 63, where second shots or third shots might have come from, because they don't think Lee Harvey Oswald could have done it himself with the difficulties and the magic bullet and everything that hit both Kennedy and the governor. They're thinking that maybe the shots came from an elevated position inside the building, like a window or something. So let's throw that in there. But both were patsies. And yet we still don't know. And the cover-up has begun. And they're hemming and hawing because they thought they'd have time to sweep it under the rug, because the news media would be wall-to-wall assassination, the death of Donald Trump, but it didn't happen. And then from there, Lee Harvey Oswald obviously has more of a story, but then Crooks pretty much dies on scene after, I guess, now it's being called a 1 in a million shot. The only difference between the two, Harvey Oswald and Crooks, is that when you sit there and you look at the conspiracy theories of Oswald, it was like a moving target going away. He got a shot off, reloaded. I think it was a bolt action, shot again, and that was the kill shot as the car is speeding away. Well, you correct that by putting somebody on a roof that's 130 yards away, which everyone is saying a beginner could have made that shot. And that's what we're looking at. But again, so you've got some very eerie, in my opinion, some similarities that are kind of eerie. It's like the same blueprint. One person, elevated position, line of sight, seen around. And then the other thing, too, is he had, apparently Crooks, the shooter for Trump, had a detonator, and his truck, though, was like 0.7 of a mile away or something like that. What was he going to do? Blow up the truck like a mile away? And then Crooks apparently had some phones, maybe connected to some cryptic accounts across overseas somewhere. So again, an overseas influence, just like Oswald had a Mexico influence with maybe some consulates down there. So a lot of the blueprint's the exact same thing. So obviously there has to be something of a deep state, whether it's CIA, foreign influence, because Kennedy was against the war, wasn't going to escalate the war because Johnson finally escalated Vietnam. Maybe Trump wants to end. He says he's going to end the war in Ukraine. So again, this hidden agenda, that's the deep state, let's just call it. Both of these candidates weren't going to serve the agendas or the interests of the deep state, so the deep state took action. Successful in one, unsuccessful in the other, and now you've got something extremely different in the aftermath, and I guess we'll have to see. But again, it goes back to hate. Hate is an emotion. It's a state of being that involves choices, behaviors, thoughts. It separates people rather than brings them together, because the one hating sets themselves away from another.